Celtics Stuff Live.
Welcome to Celtics Stuff Live on the CLNS Media Network, the leading online provider of audio and video coverage for the Boston Celtics. I'm your host, Justin Poulin. Joining me, as always, John Duke. And boy, John, we go from sour grapes to now we don't even have a loss to discuss. And thank goodness, really, right? Because they had chalked up some losses to some of the dregs of the Eastern Conference, the New York Knicks notwithstanding. They get a rematch against them. Chicago gets Lauri Markkanen back, but obviously, and they had a spirited win the night before against Oklahoma City, but back down to earth for the Chicago Bulls, and obviously a coaching change. And I do have to really quickly shout out, though, does Mike Gorman ever miss an opportunity to give the great old state of Maine some props? I mean, seriously. So, we've got Steve Clifford, who we love to talk about all the time, obviously coached at University of Maine at Farmington. Every time we play a Rick Carlisle coach team, and I say that because the reference to the University of Maine goes back to his Indiana days as a coach on the broadcast. So obviously he played about 3 years before Chicago's own oh my goodness, Jim Boylen, right? Did I nail that or did I mess that up?
You messed up, but Boylen.
Yeah. I was like, so he knows people from Maine better than I do. But so, Carlisle and Boylen both play, cause there's the other Jim Boylen, right? Just spelled differently, which just always throws me. But anyway, so, both of them playing for the University of Maine. Jim Boylen was a captain, his couple of years. And so just a few years apart. They didn't overlap at all. And obviously Carlisle transferred to Virginia. So, he only spent his first 2 seasons with Maine. He spent the final 2 in Virginia. But still, does Mike Gorman ever miss an opportunity? I don't think so.
No. And when we had him on, I remember talking to him about that because he always brings up, the Big East guys and the things that he covered back in the day when he did the Big East, broadcast in the 80s for ESPN. And I remember asking him, I'm like, do you still cover it? And he's like, no, I absorb it all, and he always does bring up the Mainers, he was, I didn't realize that Jim Boylen was the co-player of the year, in the precursor to the America East, with sharing the title with Reggie Lewis. So that's weird? Pretty interesting. I did not realize that.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is a good time to mention that the University of Maine I should say the state of Maine is the only state in the nation to have never sent a college basketball team, and there's only one in Division I, to the NCAA tournament. That'd be the University of Maine. So we've got all these coaches in the NBA, but we haven't been able to put it together at the NCAA tournament stage. Oh, well, what can you do?
Well, I mean,
football
it's
teams
not
doing
like
well.
There's not nearly as many teams hanging out in the great state of Maine in terms of colleges that are even in contention for that, really. That's the issue, obviously. But, it means Vermont's been there, and yes, they have, not in the all too distant past. It means who went from New Hampshire then? UNH? Did they climb in?
They must have been in. They must have been in at some point.
It must have been UNH, right? So if UNH can get in, then Maine, come on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess maybe.
And interestingly enough, we talked about Carlisle, we talked about Steve Clifford, now with Jim Boylen, right? We haven't talked about Brett Brown, obviously, who played
at South Portland. That's right.
And here's another interesting one. Kenny Atkinson, who's the coach, obviously, of the Brooklyn Nets. He played at MCI Prep for a year, back in 86. So we got 5 guys.
Was that the Sam Cassell time, or was Sam after that? Was he more in the 90s?
Yeah.
More in the 90s?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about when he came out, but still, either way.
MCI was pretty tough. They had a lot of good players that came through there. DeMar, there was a lot of guys that came through there. And, so we got 5 guys that have some connection to the state of Maine, which is pretty cool. So I'm pretty happy with that. What I wouldn't be happy is if I was Jim Boylen today after putting in what was the worst loss in the history of the Chicago Bulls and having that on my resume, having players say they called the players only meeting, the coach saying no they didn't, There's a lot of he said, she said, well, a lot of he said, I guess. But either way, the Celtics, they're rolling, man. They are feeling good, playing well. They have the best net rating in the league over the last 15 games. They are absolutely destroying things. Things are looking up, and I am so happy because
it's all the change in that starting lineup. All that change in the starting lineup. And, you know, I'm going to break it down to this, because even during the Knicks game, there was chemistry on the second unit between Brown and Hayward, who everybody had kind of pointed the finger at and said, these two can't coexist in the starting lineup. And here they are coexisting just fine in the second unit. And it really is. There's just too many offensive players, not enough defensive players. And I don't mean that, you know, like with a harsh criticism of either Brown or Hayward at all. I mean it simply because, you know, like even Kyrie's making an enormous effort defensively, but you just don't have anybody with that tenacity of Marcus Smart. And a lot of people had talked about, and I don't want to say just the pundits, just Twitter in general, the conversation on Celtics Weird Twitter was just that we just don't have anybody to do the dirty work. And we have all these players, you know, that are used to being featured in the offense. And even last year it was a luxury, but Brown and Tatum both got used to it as well. And so this has made so much sense to me. And even the way Brad is now staggering the substitutions and the lineups to keep that blended. And it seems like everybody, once spread out like that, is really able to figure out their role. Brown has obviously been very hot in his return. That was just an amazing performance the first night back. And then, you know, against Chicago, he still had a very nice outing. Everybody attacking the basket a lot more. Terry Rozier seems to be catching back on fire, which is a really strong thing to see. Some of it has to obviously do with the opponents that they're facing. But at the end of the day, I think that what happened is they put those dirt dogs, they put the Marcuses in the starting lineup. They got some real tremendous effort from them. And then it allowed Hayward to get a little bit more of the ball in his hands and to facilitate and Brown to attack. The problem is, if Brown keeps playing like this off the bench, I think these guys are going to work their way back into the starting lineup eventually. If not the starting lineup, then the closing lineup will, if not a 56-point win or lead, greater than 30 points in the fourth quarter, that'll be the closing lineup. They'll find their way back together and be able to finish out games, even if they need to be separated to get hot to start the game.
Hey, here's some bad podcasting radio without, really creating controversy. I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think part of we talked about this way back a month ago, 6 weeks ago. And the issue that I saw at the time was there's too many variables, too many things that were not quite complete pieces. Kyrie fell into place. Okay. I think Tatum was the next piece who kind of found himself. I think then you had Gordon find himself. Now you're having Jalen do the same thing. And I'm saying the Marcuses are kind of separate because I think they've been solid since day one. In spite of what Marcus Smart's going through, obviously a great piece by Adam Himmelsbach on what Marcus Smart's dealing with. We get Marcus Morris is obviously a new dad, obviously. We saw the back of the jersey. But now we've got, I think, the final two pieces, the most important two pieces in making this team go from pretty good to really being contenders with the Warriors. And that's having Jaylen Brown and having Terry Rozier become who we thought they were. If we're going to crown them, we're going to crown them, you know, just like Denny Green always said. So yeah. That's, I think, what we're seeing right now is it's kind of like we had to separate the pieces out. The core pieces are now being able to be built on top of, and now everyone's kind of finding their level. And I think what's going to happen personally is that they're going to stay separate, but at some point as you said, Brad's doing a nice job mixing and matching. We're going to see that starting group that you really wanted to see start the season. That group is going to be playing a lot of minutes together sooner or later. And slowly, the Marcuses and Rozier are going to be pushed back to the role that we thought they were. But the difference is they're going to have that confidence and they're going to be where they were. And I think the Celtics ultimately are going to look a lot like we thought they were, after January, after February. I think the second half of this year is going to be trying to build them exactly as we thought they were going to be. Not, unfortunately, just didn't work in the first month. Too much change was going on. I feel good about where we're headed now. And I think we just need to make sure people are feeling good in their roles. They have that confidence. And then Brad can go back to, I think, plan A all along.
And maybe, but let's table that for 1 second. And a reminder to everybody, you can follow Celtics Stuff Live on Twitter at CSL_tweet live, as well as your host. You can follow me at CSL_Justin. John is at CSL_Duke, and the entire CLNS Media Network at CLNS Media. Facebook.com/CLNS fans, and download the CLNS Media app for iOS and Android. Simply search for CLNS Media in your app marketplace. Finally, the YouTube channel, youtube.com/CLNS Media for high definition full length locker room interviews and the Garden Report. So, John, I think you're right. I think it is going to slowly transition back, but I don't think there's any rush, because one of the things we talked about was getting that early lead, right? And they obviously did against the Bulls, although the Bulls started to climb back in. But I do think that with Hayward and Brown on the bench, that's where they really can get. And Terry Rozier, obviously, now that he's hot too, I think they can get that lead that if the starting unit doesn't get it, they'll obviously stay close because of the defensive efforts, especially of Marcus Smart. But, you know, Marcus Morris has been on fire from outside. I think Chicago was his first bad game where he wasn't just torching every open shot from three, but outside, that might have been the first game, honestly, where he missed like 2 or 3 wide open threes. And with all that said, even if they only stay even for whatever reason or another, I think that second unit is it's a second unit that resembles our starting unit last year. And with the opposing team's second units out there, I think they can really distance themselves. And that's what we were hoping for. We were hoping for more and more big leads that could potentially be sustained by the bench unit. And then in the fourth quarter, we could see the likes of Yabu, and we'll talk about injuries after we finish this. But we wanted to see the likes of Ojale and Yabu. We wanted to keep the minutes down for some of these vets, reduce the potential for, yes, our next topic, injuries. So I really like the way that this is. And I think it's a slow transition back to that starting lineup. I think they actually work them out in closing minutes first before they reintroduce them as the starting lineup.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll actually even go back to being starters. I wonder if they'll stay with this. They'll stay with this structure to start the game, but they will close. And I think it's going to be Warriors-esque, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. You know, the Warriors don't start their lineup of death, and I think I think we're now seeing why that is. But we still know that when we think of the Warriors, we think of the lineup with Steph and Clay and Draymond and KD and Iguodala. That's the lineup. That's the one that you worry about. And I think putting the Celtics version of that, which is, you know, Tatum, Brown, Hayward, Kyrie, and Horford, to get that fivesome together, that's what I think they need to work on here from the rest of the way. Trying to make sure that unit is as solid and as strong as it can possibly be. And I think that's the effort. Where they fall and where the lineups kind of, or I should say the rotations perhaps overlap and allow for that group to succeed, I think that's maybe where things will be tweaked. That they'll be trying to find ways to maximize that, whether it's fourth quarters, whether it's, the second quarters as they're kind of dovetailing one group coming into the other. I think that's what they're going to try to do. I think they're going to try to build it that way as opposed to, okay, we're going to play them all together and then all of them are coming out. It just seems it doesn't allow for the strength of the team to come through and we allow guys like Tatum to take over or Brown to take over, Hayward to take over, which has worked so well here over the last few weeks.
And we already know that Rozier really isn't a traditional point guard, which is why you had said, hey, it makes so much more sense to keep him alongside Smurf. But I'm not so sure that that's the case. I think Smart in the starting lineup also helps get Kyrie free, because he can take those ball handling responsibilities. Originally, it looked like maybe Hayward would be taking that pressure off. But the thing is you get such an uptick in defense and you get balance in the rotations, balance in the lineup itself. And Smart can do so many different things for energy to start out the game. So that part really works well. Secondarily, Terry gets that support that maybe he's sort of like, I don't even want to say he's battling with Smart because he's not, right? But at the same time, Gordon can kind of share those responsibilities, and he's so good on the pick and roll, which works great against opposing teams' second units because they're just never solid pick and roll defenders. And all of a sudden, Hayward is just slicing and dicing them. Some of the passes he had the other night were phenomenal. And that also allows him to just slowly build his confidence and get his athleticism back to where it needs to be. And then Brown also benefits because he can really be very aggressive. This whole thing with having Brown get stuck in the corner to shoot open threes, he's been pretty good considering the criticism of him when he was coming out in the draft. He's been good from beyond the arc and gotten even better this year, but it just leaves him too far out of the equation. So much better to have him attacking the basket and going at the rim. And he has that opportunity with that second unit. And again, not so much. I didn't see Hayward and Brown together as much in the Bulls game, but in the Knicks game, Gordon found him on a couple of really nifty passes to make he was basically driving the lane on one play. And on the other one, I think he was coming in from the wing, but either way, it just made it really easy for Brown to score, and his athleticism towers above most second units as well.
A lot of good things there that you just said. Credit and pats on the back to you. Yo ho ho. And a bottle of rum. Anyway,
and a bottle of rum.
That's the part we didn't record, so you're not gonna get that one at the end of the show. Listen, so couple things. One, there's two things I like about the starting unit. I like having people in the starting lineup who will take some pressure off Kyrie, take some pressure off Horford. We talked about Baines and how I feel about Baines being in there. We'll get into the injury stuff. Marcus is doing the same thing for Kyrie, taking that pressure off early in the game. I think that's great. I appreciate it. The problem is I don't think the Celtics can be as good as Celtics can be, and this is going to sound disrespectful, if Horford and Kyrie need to have caddies out there with them. You guys take care of the dirty work and then hold off, and I don't think that's certainly where I'm coming from, but I want, you need to have as many players on the court who have as many skills as possible. Smart is a plus defender and a really good playmaker, but the Warriors are going to find a way to make that an issue for you, so I would feel a whole lot better with Brown, Tatum, that five. So I guess what I'm saying is I want them to have opportunities to take that pressure off, but when rubber meets road, I want that five, that Horford, Hayward, Tatum, Brown, Kyrie unit. I want that group on the floor because I think that's the Celtics' best opportunity to beat the Warriors, to beat anybody. And then second to that, and part of that is Brown. Brown, I think we talked about it. He is the canary in the coal mine. When things are going well for the Celtics unit and they're moving the ball and the ball's zipping around and there's motion, there's movement, he gets open, whether he's in the corner or not. He's going to be the fifth option. No matter what he does, he's the fifth option in that group. But he could be such a dangerous fifth option. I mean, my goodness, just driving closeouts alone, if the ball's zipping around, by the time it's finding the guy in the corner and they're closing out, he's past that guy and he's yamming on somebody's head, probably Joel Embiid again. That's the magic right there. It'd be great to have Marcus Smart in that role, but when he's out there, is the guy going to close out quite as hard? No, he's not. He's going to ease up a little bit maybe and let Smart take that shot. You can't let Jalen do that. So that's, in my heart, I'm kind of going back on what I said to start the year. I'm kind of taking your side of it, but I totally agree with that's the power. If Jaylen Brown is Jaylen Brown, this Celtics team is up a level, and they can make even Toronto, who's playing this well, look pretty silly.
Boy, that was a lot of credit you just threw my way. Thank you, is Janos. All right, everybody. Hey, Boston sports fans, do you want to get killer seats to see your favorite team for the price of a beer or a large pizza? Tired of paying for all the inflated markups from brokers or last-minute convenience charges just so you end up paying courtside prices for those nosebleed seats? Go to 1in100.co. That's ONEIN 100.co. Feeling lucky? Try it out now. There's no other place online that's doing raffles to win tickets to events, and it's a totally new way to score tickets to see the Boston Celtics. The cost to potentially win these tickets with 1in100 is a small fraction of the actual ticket price. You can get a pair of tickets for less than the cost of a beer, and your first raffle ticket is free after you sign up. The experience of using 1in100 is extremely fun and exciting, from picking your lucky number to the feeling of potentially scoring premium tickets. Are you feeling lucky? Try it. 1in100.co. That's ONEIN 100.co. And Robinhood, an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos, all commission free. This non-intimidating way for stock market newcomers to invest for the first time with true confidence. I have friends that have been encouraging me to invest in cryptocurrencies, and now I've finally done it with Robinhood's easy-to-use app. Other brokerages charge up to $10 for every trade, but Robinhood, listen up, doesn't charge commission fees. You can trade stocks and keep all of your profits. Learn how to invest as you build your portfolio and discover new stocks and track favorite companies with a personalized news feed. There's also custom notifications for price movements, so you never miss the right moment to invest. Robinhood is giving our listeners a free stock like Apple, Ford, or Sprint to help you build your portfolio. Sign up at celticstuff.robinhood.com. That's celticstuff.robinhood.com. All right, John. So again, appreciate the pats on the back, but now we're going to go to injuries, which is a little out of hand. It obviously opened the door for a stellar and really just a career night for Daniel Tice. And if you remember, before the season started, I picked him as sort of this, sort of underdog, not really comeback player on the Celtics, but, the dark horse candidate to make a big impact for this team. I can't remember the term we gave it exactly, but he was a guy I thought would surprise this season. He certainly did surprise us against the Bulls. He had a fantastic performance. He's hitting threes. He got blocks. A lot of great things that were happening out there, but a lot of that was because of the injuries that have plagued this team. Baines obviously twisted his ankle pretty bad against, I believe it was the Knicks game, or was it early in the Chicago game? It was the Knicks game.
Knicks. Yeah, you're right.
So he twists his ankle really bad in the Knicks game, and then Yabu goes down, and Al Horford's kind of, we know that with Al, though. Al just needs a break here and there. He had a big game, and then he needs a night off. He's getting older. We somewhat come to expect that. But Yabu was having a pretty good night before he got hurt. And I know how much you love to see that.
I do. I know. Tice was amazing. I loved what Tice did. I mean, he's a guy I really appreciate, and I like what he does. And you said it yourself that there's going to be times when people are going to sit and there's going to be opportunities because, situations will arise where they're just going to rest guys. And now that the team is kind of finding its balance here, I think you're going to see more of that. I think earlier on, perhaps, Horford wasn't getting those rest nights when he deserved them and needed them. And I think he got over exhausted from that. Now, so I was glad to see how Yabu played. Unfortunately, Time Lord was off. A new baby came into his life. So Time Lord Jr. maybe, or not know. We'll find out.
Hold on. A new baby just came into his life. The way you characterize that, I can only imagine the stork dropping the baby off at some NBA player's doorstep,
He did the Time Lord thing. The things from Doctor Strange, and opened up the eye, and then all of a sudden the Time Lord, a stork came in, and here it was. Anyway.
But he's got plenty of time to raise a kid right now, but I wish we would see him. I wish we'd see him time. Before. That would have been the best game for him to go out there for sure.
Totally. And it'll be interesting because it sounds like he's going to be back for the Pelicans game tonight. Again, when we're recording this, we don't know. So that would be great because I think they really need him, obviously, because at this point it's Tice and who knows what's going to happen with Horford. I am a little worried about Horford though. The knee, blew up on him. They weren't expecting that. That worries me. Until we hear a little bit more about that, there hasn't been really a lot of conversation about Horford and his knee, but, a sleeve showed up on his leg the other night. There was some talk earlier on. He had some issues with the knee. So that's not very comforting. What is comforting is to see how well the Celtics played in spite of his absence. But they're going to need Al Horford at 110% against Anthony Davis, because you need everything going to defend Anthony Davis, and so he's going to be needed or missed. I think Tice actually is a guy who might be able to keep up with him. It might be the right body type at least, but there's an intellect and a
the guy's going to go off
amazing.
On us. He always does. He got picked apart in the inside, even when Horford was healthy. Regardless of whether or not he's tired, he's still, as you've said, probably better suited for the power forward position, even though we like to go small and give it up a little bit on offense. Even in that Knicks game, as good as that game was, went in the end, it was still very close the whole way through. And coming out of halftime, Brad said they made it really easy on the Knicks getting inside the paint, and he was pretty upset with that and thought that it's great that the shots were going down, and they needed it too, because they weren't able to stop any of the Knicks from getting inside. And so similar kind of concerns all season long that way. If Horford is out, they're definitely going to be giving up a lot of points in the paint. That's going to be a struggle for him. Even if Tice can keep up with him, he's going to get tired trying to keep up with him. Good thing he had a night off since that Bulls game, right? Because certainly he's going to need all the rest he can get if he's going to wind up getting the call. Sounds like Baines is going to be out. I don't know if he's questionable or game time decision or what the deal is, but he twisted it pretty good. It's hard to imagine him, even if did they give a time frame for how long Baines was going to be out?
No, it's
a day-to-day thing, right?
Well, in fact, they even said he was questionable. So at this point, he and Horford are questionable. The only one who's out for Monday night is Yabusele. And so, which is really unfortunate too, because this is an opportunity for Yabusele. He needs to take advantage of these situations to earn his keep. And while the Celtics did pick up his option for next year, he's clearly somebody who's on the fringes of this roster. So all these opportunities and being out at a time when other players are also out, really bad timing and unfortunate for Yabusele.
Well, and it's going to end up leading to minutes for Williams. And if Williams' athleticism really impresses and, he continues to be sort of that good locker room learner that they've said he's been since he showed up, despite earning the Time Lord nickname for showing up late. So, it seems to be that there could be an opportunity for him. He'll get those minutes if he continues to get the opportunity to play and plays well. So it's certainly possible they could use a shot altering blocker out there. His athleticism is off the hook. I actually could see him in the starting lineup, not at the end of the game, but I could see him floating into the starting lineup, probably not over Tice at this point, but he would fit pretty well just because of what we already talked about, like having a player out there who kind of can just have one role and everybody else does their thing. He could fit in. I mean, look at the way Brown fit in when Navy Bradley went down and then did pretty well. I mean, Brown is a much better player than he was that season, and yet he worked very well in that starting lineup because they said, this is all we really need you to do while you're out there. You could see something similar happen with Williams in that starting lineup, especially if they needed to stretch somebody's minutes out. But it's only going to happen if somebody like Baines and Horford are both out and they think, well, we're going to need to save Tice's fouls and minutes for the close of the game or we're really going to be dead. Then they might start somebody like Williams just to stretch that out with Tice and make sure they have him.
Yeah, I like, it's funny with all of these, going into the season, I was really expecting a really different plan in terms of how minutes were going to be used and how the bigs were going to fit into this. You could argue that there's too many good bigs on this team. And there, at some places there weren't enough guys on the wing. But now I guess, you look at where they are and, the need for fouls hasn't been as evident perhaps all the time. They have run against some big lineups, but lately it's been really get small. Cantor killed them, the other night. And perhaps if Baines was healthy for a longer period of time, that might have helped. But really both games with the Knicks, they've had trouble trying to keep Kanter in check, or I guess three games they've had with Kanter. So I think it's time for Time Lord. I think it's really, we talked about this at last show. I still stand by that. I think this is a really good opportunity for him. And I hope he really can take advantage of it. I just don't, what I worry about is Horford. I want Horford to be okay. The Celtics are not winning the NBA championship, or maybe even getting to the NBA championship without Al Horford being Al Horford.
Yep, that goes without saying. They're going to be in a lot of trouble. And so we'll keep an eye on that knee. If he plays tonight, I'll feel a lot better about it. Let's look at the week ahead, then we'll wrap the show. But we got the Pelicans tonight at home, and then they get a night off. We play the Wizards. That's down in D.C., but that's a short flight, so it's almost a home game. I'd almost be surprised if they don't come back home that night and sleep in their own beds. And then obviously another night off with the Hawks on Friday, another home game, and then another short flight. This is the first back-to-back in a little while where they'll face the Pistons on Saturday night. So we have a full 4 games on deck for this coming week, and we're going to have to make our predictions again. So who's going first, John, you or me?
Why don't you start? I'll let you go first.
Okay. I'm going to say, man, that, I predicted they would lose to the Pelicans last time, and then it was whatever, right? they beat, I said they're either going to, I think they'll lose to the Pelicans, right? But then I was like, well, if they don't lose to the Pelicans, they'll lose to Minnesota and Karl Anthony Towns, but somebody's going to beat them in the middle. So they went undefeated. That was the first undefeated week for us on the show, and we totally miscalled that. So I'm gonna say it's at home and they're running hard, even though they could be in a lot of trouble physically. I'm gonna say they get a win. Again, I'm gonna go 3-1, and I'm actually gonna say a loss against the Pistons, who have kind of messed me up. I know, a weird one. But they've been hovering in that same point, in the standings. You know what I mean? The Pistons have kind of been there. Not that the Celtics shouldn't be far and away better than the Pistons, but I'm going to say the Pistons wind up stealing one from them. That becomes a difficult. So I'm going 3-1. 3 wins, which extends their winning streak pretty extensively, but that second night of the back-to-back on the road winds up catching up to them.
Well, I hear you on the 3-1. I'm not going to go there. I'm going 4-0, actually. I think the Celtics are going to run off 9 straight, at least.
This is sounding a lot like last year, baby.
and then they got Phoenix on the Wednesday after that, and then Milwaukee and Charlotte and Philly. So after they go to Detroit, they're going to play 4 home games in a row around the Christmas break. I think so. Right now, I just want to kind of lay this out. The Celtics are 15-10 as we record this tonight. Okay. They're 2.5 games back, of Philadelphia for second place in the Eastern Conference. I predict that by the time we get to Christmas Day, the Celtics will be tied or ahead of the Philadelphia 76ers.
Well,
okay.
That's probably a good bet, just because Embiid is all of a sudden starting to complain about his role. Oh, really? Who do you think may have influenced that? That's
interesting.
They are who they are anyway, right? But you got to think Butler. You got to think Butler, right?
It's absolutely
Philly did it.
Philly's a joke. They're not a joke. They're a good team, but they're never going to be a great team. As long as that coward has a big role in the Philadelphia 76ers, and they've got Markelle Fultz being whatever it is in his socket, whatever. No, it's not happening. I just don't see it for Philly. I saw that game against Toronto, and Toronto's good. That is a solid team. The Celtics at full capacity are going to have a hard time with Toronto, but Philadelphia is just a notch below at best. And I'm just not a big fan of any of their makeup, of what they got. They've got a lot of potential, but the pieces don't fit. So
the outside shooting, that was a concern.
Yep.
It clogs things, and it makes it hard to spread the ball around, and all of those issues. I thought that this would actually end up being a good thing, but once you start having locker room issues, it's a problem. Look at how the Celtics started this year.
Absolutely. No doubt. And I think that it's coming home to roost for Philly. I wouldn't be surprised next summer if, things get really weird for the Sixers. And that's going to put the Celtics behind Toronto. That's where it's going to be. If by January 1st, the Celtics are in second place behind Toronto and they're, a handful of games back, that's okay. I like the trend line. I don't think, can Toronto keep it up? We'll see. But you need to have.
I think they will. Kawhi is on fire.
He is.
Unless he gets injured, they're gonna maintain that. But I'll agree with you. I'm not sure I'll say Christmas Day because that's only just a touch over 2 weeks. I'm going to be a little bit more conservative, but I agree with you about the Celtics moving up in the standings. They have a much easier schedule than they did in terms of opponents and a couple of tough ones that will end up having an impact on the standings. So I'd say by January 1st, they leapfrog. What they really need to do this year is they've already had their letdown more than any other year to start the season. They've had a letdown, kind of slow out of the gate, but they corrected every year faster than they did this year. And then they have that January 1st sort of Christmas through the first 2 weeks in January letdown. That has to be a thing of the past this year. They've already gotten gifted all that. They have to stay hot in January, February, and ride out the season. And if they do that, they'll probably land pretty close to those 60 wins in the end anyway, but it's going to be tight, and they're going to have to be really stellar. We're going to see a lot more crushing defeats of lesser opponents like the Bulls more and more for the rest of the going here.
No doubt about it. I couldn't agree with more. They need to put themselves in a position where they're within shouting distance, which I consider 2 or 3 games of the people at the top. And if they do that, I'm not at all worried about, the fact that they have January, February, March, and 3 months in April, 3 weeks in April, I should say, to top and get to the head of the list. I think they really need home court. I think home court against Toronto is important.
Critical.
I love Toronto. I just love the way they play. They're playing so hard. Can Siakam be Siakam in the playoffs? We're going to see. Lowry, they need to prove it in the playoffs.
Kawhi is the X factor. Dude.
He is
both sides of the ball, and he's dominant. And that's,
but that works in the regular season. I don't know if he's going to. Can he play like that in the postseason against, on that team? This isn't the Spurs who are moving the ball and really making everyone a threat. So I know I'm not saying I don't believe it can happen.
No, I hear what you're saying.
But
it's a different animal. It's a different strategy. There's rest off in between nights, but at the same time, you key in on guys. You do things differently than you do on a night after night after night, grueling regular season. So I hear your point there. I still think you're right about the home court advantage being crucial, but that's going to do it for this week's show. This broadcast will be available on demand on the CLNS Media mobile app, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. That was pretty good. At CSL_Justin and at CSL_Duke. A heartfelt thank you to everybody for tuning in. And remember that you can help support the show by subscribing to Celtic Stuff Live on iTunes and Stitcher. We'd love it if you gave us a rating and a review because your feedback is important to the show. And for staff writer Samuel Elias, who we're not even sure, I was just going to say, we talked about this after everyone. I'm not sure that he is our staff writer anymore. Well, I may have to update the script, but executive producer Larry H. Russell, Tommy's still around, that's for sure.
We know Larry's still around, yeah.
Yep, Larry's there. I'm not even sure he goes by Larry anymore. The founder of CLNS Media, Nick Gelso, he's certainly around.
You can't get rid of him. He's always around, and he's still listening. Hi, Nick.
He's the founder. He is definitely still listening. And I'm also, and for my co-host, John Duke.
I'm here.
Justin Poulin.
You're
Thank
here.
you for listening to this week's edition. Why don't you say it this time? Of
Celtic Stuff Live.
Celtic Stuff Live.
Bye, everybody.
We do have to keep getting creative with these endings now. We set that expectation out. People are waiting. They're listening around. Last year it was the Time Lord thing. You were accidentally muting yourself, so it's becoming an outtakes.
I know. I just realized I just leaned on that. Shoot. Oh man. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. And what's great about this, did you know okay, I didn't get you went into the outro. The Celtics, so the Kings pick right now is only, and as well as they've played, they're only 2.5 games back of Washington. All right. So if they fall, and they've played well, but if they fall, Washington has the 7th spot. They have a 31.9% chance of a top 4 pick.
That's still awesome.
So we could still be, everyone's like, oh, everyone's winning and stuff. Like, look, like Sacramento is 13-12. If they slide a little bit, they could be in the 7th spot. Now,
I feel like we don't get crazy about that until February. You know what I mean? Like,
but also everything's kind of jumbled in terms of the roster. I mean, like that right now, let's see,
where's Memphis?
Are
they getting too bad?
Yeah, they're 20th right now, but that's the thing. There's only 4.5 games between them and Washington. So at some point this is going to shake out, like Minnesota's 13-13. New Orleans is 14-14. Utah's 13-13. Houston is 11-14. Like there's all these teams around 500.
Conference is really funky.
It's going to shake out though, I think, at some point. And then if Sacramento drops, like they could drop that far. Like, do you think really Minnesota's going to bottom out? I don't think Utah's going to bottom out. I don't think the Spurs are going to bottom out.
Utah's bottomed out for what they really are. They're going to climb.
I think so too. I mean, I don't think they're as great as everyone said they were, but I mean, I still think things will be a much better. I don't know if the Celtics are going to get a top 2 pick, or top 3 pick, but I think that the odds are not as bad against them as one might think.
The point is they need these picks to stay young because they're going to lose players, and then they need guys or they need to combine them. Yep, it could be
the guy. The guy said
going to make that pick before they can trade it.
I don't know.
Yeah, they do. They can't. No. It has to go into next season. The draft happens before.
Yeah, I know.
Or do you think they can? But he's got to be in a new contract, and he can't be in a new contract.
Right.
Well, so they would have to essentially make the pick for them and then trade the player.
Okay, let's just say this. If I'm New Orleans, right? If I'm New Orleans and I want Anthony Davis, or I want to keep Anthony Davis, I'm going to go to him for the draft because that's when I'll get my best offer, right? And I'm going to say to him, Anthony, we're going to offer you the full, designated player exception, blah, blah, blah. And give him until before the draft. And
but the Rose rule still prevents us until after the season.
Yeah, but you can,
remember because Zarin wanted to change all that. Yeah, they were like, guys, we should not be making decisions about the draft. You can say we're going to make the deal, but you can't execute the deal.
But that's more about free agency than it is about trades because you have player control. Like in this case,
but we have to be into a new contract state. To be able to make the deal.
But they have deals all the time where you'll say, that the rights will be
conveyed. The Celtics are going to have to make a pick.
No, they won't. They can agree upon a deal, right? Make the picks on New Orleans' behalf.
That's my point. Right? But if it
and then you do it in, January 1st, you consummate the deal. I mean, that's
July. But
July.
No, yeah. I got you. But what I'm saying is, there's still a leap of faith there. Like they might agree to it.
Yeah.
But stuff can still happen after they agree to that deal. And here's my point. If Danny doesn't like the pick, like it almost requires New Orleans and the Celtics to agree on the pick. Like, if they don't execute the deal, the Celtics are still happy with the player that they picked. That's where you run into an issue in my opinion. So that's where I go back to Zarin. I'm like, Zarin has it right. The NBA needs to change this.
Yeah.
The draft is supposed to fix the issue it's supposed to fix the holes in your roster. Mm-hmm. So you ought to have a pretty good idea of what your roster is going to look like, and I get it. That's why everybody takes best player available. And, there's all those NBA draft cliches.
Right.
But really, you want to know what your team's going to look like. And if you're going to lose a player, you ought to be able to execute a trade before you make a pick too.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, I get you. I think
would you push the draft to later?
Yeah.
Would you say let's do free agency right after the close of the season? like give it a week or two, like maybe July 1 or June, 28th is free agency starts, and then do the draft at the problem is then you got all these summer leagues that are already scheduled and set up.
Right. You'd almost have to do it, 2 weeks into July.
You almost have to do it simultaneously. You know what? You do it simultaneously. You open free agency up, right before the draft, basically. So you just start it sooner. You don't change the schedule anywhere else. You just start it sooner. And then the thing is, then the teams are so distracted trying to do all these different things at the same time. Yeah. So bizarre, dude. It's just weird.
There has to be a gap, I think, somewhat. But no, I think you're right. You move it later, somewhat later, and then somehow
why not move the summer league stuff into August, and then they really get a full 12 months out of this deal. Because if they do free agent, they don't rush the draft, right? The close of the season happens. Everybody gets a breather. They go into free agency on the same time schedule. They do the draft at the end of July when most of free agency settled itself out. Then they do summer league through August. The next thing you know, training camps are opening up.
Well, I think most NBA front offices like to shut down effectively in August, September. They like to take their vacation.
Yeah, they want a breather.
Yeah.
All right, Danny, I'm sorry if you're listening to this at the extended,
no vacations.
No vacations for you, Danny.
but they could agree to a deal before, the problem is that I think is that they would, if he were to sign a deal, he would have to sign a deal in the new year. I think he can only be offered, he can only officially sign it after July 1, but they could say to him, look, we want you to offer you this, but you need to give us an answer by June 28th because that's when the draft is.
They're going to be worried. They're not going to play that way though, because what they're going to want to do is have control over his destination. They're not going to want to be pushed that way. You know what I mean? And he's going to get flaky. Teams, anybody giving up that much talent to go get him, and only have him for 1 year, it's going to want to have some reassurances that he wants to come, and they technically can't even talk to him yet because free agency hasn't opened, so it's tampering at the draft.
Well, no, you can't.
Isn't it? No, I guess if the team gives permission,
it's
right?
KG. It's KG all over again.
That's true.
So you can give permission. You can go down that road. I think there's a timing thing that works with this, but I think they can give those picks up, and I think you're right. There is a bit of trust that goes with that, but if Sean Marks didn't do that, I mean, he'd be dead to the rest of the league. Yeah. No one would trust him to do another deal with him if he screwed over the Celtics like that.
Well, there we go. We're having this conversation way premature, but
yeah,
it's still good to think about.
It's a good post-show conversation.
You didn't think we were going to have it, but there you have it, everybody.